Hello again, you're joining us on this edition of India Tonight. We are watching what's happening on Wall Street right now. The Dow Jones is marginally down, but the Nasdaq is taking a more substantial cut, around more than half a percentage point, and so also the S&P 500 thereabouts, so about half a percentage point. So clearly investors are returning their focus to the latest batch of corporate earnings, and that's the impact that we're seeing on Wall Street. They continue to weigh the outlook for future Federal Reserve policy moves, but all the three major indices, they open in the red, and investors clearly are watching out for more earnings coming from Walt Disney and Robinhood, and that's going to come post trading hours in the US. We'll wait for that to happen. But there are two major statements coming out from the US, one of Jerome Powell, the other, of course, the President Joe Biden himself. The Fed chair on his part is saying that the US economy is in early stages of disinflation. He sees disinflation in the goods sector, but not in the services. Powell also has warned that rates could go higher if economic data throws up any surprises. On the other hand, the president himself, Joe Biden, has spoken in the State of Union address, and he says that inflation has been a global problem because of the pandemic. He acknowledges, of course, that more needs to be done, but he also says that inflation is finally coming down. And interestingly, Joe Biden has said that his country is going to need oil for years to come, while also he's gone on to press for a billionaire tax. So what do these two big signals mean to the global markets, and especially as we follow its trajectory from the start of the year in 2023? Let's understand this a little more clearly. Joining us is Peter Cardillo, and of course joining him is Anurag Singh. Great to have you both gentlemen with us back on this edition of India Tonight. Anurag, in his speech, the US President Joe Biden, he said to Congress that the US economy is better positioned to grow than any country on earth, despite these disruptions from the pandemic, from Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Would you and perhaps the American people, do you believe what he says?
Well, so there are two parts to the question, Vikram. Do I believe what he said? Well, absolutely not. I read economics and I understand business. His audience is largely the bottom 50% of the country who don't pay any taxes and don't understand economics. So that's as blunt as it gets. We are not Biden's base. His base is a very different set of people. I think people just broadly need to understand, I think for those who are not, in tune with US politics, Republicans are broadly capitalists. They support free business, less regulation, open markets. Democrats, which is Biden's party, is broadly socialist. They believe there should be distribution of wealth from capitalist companies to the larger social section of the society, including unions and everybody else, which doesn't benefit because of systemic reasons. It's a softer form of socialism, and they're stretching it too far. So I don't believe, Vikram, what he said, and I think we can dwell into details, but I think much of it is the typical ratchet, which is very similar to what you hear from any developing country, where you keep ratcheting up the base on the basis of the socialistic utopian idea. And especially when you've just lost the Congress and you can't do anything but just blame the opposition for the whole, not the opposition, but the Republicans who actually hold the purse strings now, because supposedly the Democrats are now the opposition on the Congress.
Peter, do weigh in on the inflation front, because the Fed chair has said that the US economy is in the early stages of disinflation, and we've heard from the president also, and he's saying that, yes, inflation is finally coming down. Where do we stand on inflation in the US right now, and the Fed's ability to be able to contain it, even as the other moving pieces, as far as the jobs data is concerned and the economy is concerned, all of that remains pretty resilient, doesn't it?
Indeed it does, but inflation is coming down, and I expect inflation to come down even more. Perhaps by year end, we could see inflation somewhere around maybe 4.5%. Next week, we have inflation data, and I expect the CPI to show another drop. There's no question that inflation is coming down. And from a wage inflation viewpoint, you have to realize that we had a very strong labor market report last week, but again, wages were up modestly, another indication that wage inflation has peaked. Of course, there's a risk in inflation, and that risk is energy. And so, with China and India, big buyers in the marketplace, the fact of the matter is that inflation is likely to remain, that is, oil prices, I'm sorry, are likely to remain within a range of about $70 to $80. But with the global economy slowing, and of course, even the US economy, I don't see oil prices going much beyond 80, 82 or $83 a barrel. So that will be helpful in the fight against inflation. Of course, the risk is if demand should outpace supply, then of course if that could be transitory inflation moving back into the picture.
Yes.
But I don't see that happening.
Yes, indeed. As far as oil prices go, um, the American president, Anurag, he got ridiculed from the Republicans in the House when he said the United States is going to need oil for at least another decade. Do you think that's a reasonable prediction? What does it mean for the world's oil business right now and for oil prices, according to you?
So, Vikram, that's the whole context I was laying down. Look, we have to understand when he's speaking there, he's addressing to his base. His base is bottom 50. What is usually the base of socialistic parties? Their base is the bottom 50% who don't pay any. By the way, bottom 50% doesn't pay any income tax in US. And they're always friends with that very select top 1% where they need to finance their socialistic policies from. He's addressing his base. They don't get it. That's why he said this ridiculous thing. That's why he keeps coming on channels and saying inflation is zero when it is month on month zero. I think those kind of things, you to read this in context. His base loves it. He gets the applause in the Congress, and people I'm sure who he's trying to address, they don't get any of this. US will need oil for at least next 50 years, forget next 10 years, right? But that's the politics here, what to do.
A lot of politics is going to be at play because, yes, the presidential polls are not too far away. Peter, the US president has also asked Congress to pass a minimum tax on billionaires. Was that just rhetoric, according to you? He said reward work, not just wealth, because no billionaire should pay a lower tax rate than a school teacher or a firefighter. So taxing the rich is going to be a moot point in the presidential election, you think?
Absolutely. But you know what? We have a divided Congress, and that just spells out that we have gridlock. And gridlock means that, I don't think Mr. Biden's tax proposals are going very far. In fact, I don't think his agenda is going very far. So, last night's State of the Union message was very political and full of good things, but unfortunately not obtainable. And if you look at the market results this morning, you'll see it's a big yawn for the markets. So, I wouldn't put too much credence in that. That's the Democratic rhetoric, and just like the Republican rhetoric. So it's not going very far, and I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Fair enough. Yeah. So in terms of political rhetoric, of course, you would hear a lot of it right now, but notwithstanding, the pronouncements on foreign policy, the hardline rhetoric against the Chinese, that came when it came to the alleged spy balloon. In terms of trade relations now, Anurag, between the US and China, how is that likely to change in the remainder of Biden's term, you think?
Not very much, Vikram, because look, I think it's very interesting. He just spoke about taking down the balloon, but didn't talk anything about the relationship with China. Democrats are a little soft on China, right? So they might, that's the broader policy. They're a little softer on China. The US is the epitome of the globalized economy that we see now, where you work and produce things which is most efficient geographic location to do that, right? So they're not going to. There are too many eggs in Chinese basket, so they're not going to, they might blow up the balloon, but certainly not the Chinese relationship, right? And that's why it's very easy to just continue to blow up his own propaganda balloon about socialistic policies and big oil and those taxes and billionaires and millionaires. That's the usual rhetoric, Vikram. I mean, it's sad to see that this happens in US, but well, you to understand, well, that's the base he's addressing, right? So it will not make economic sense. It's not for people like us. It's not for business channels. They amuse and laugh it out the entire day. Out here, we listen to it, but then political channels love it. That's the whole idea. Relationship is, I think the US will work and go an extra mile to make the China relationship work. Vikram, let's be very sure about this. We understand China has all the risks, but let's give it to China. They have made themselves unbeatable, almost in a place where there seems to be almost no single one alternative to China, right? So, and there is already too much in China going on, right? So this relationship will work. It will have its, kind of own push and pulls. But I think much of this is high-level rhetoric. But, behind the closed doors, relationship would work just fine, Vikram.
So pull out the politics. And as far as business is concerned, it's going to be business as usual. We will keep watching all developments on the inflation front, on the economy, and how the Americans now push through as far as inflation is concerned, especially with the interest rate hikes of the Fed. We'll see how they kind of peak and perhaps start cutting as well. But that's for later. For the moment, Peter and Anurag, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for joining us on India Tonight. Meanwhile,